Somewhere ahead of you, a bomb the size of a car is waiting to turn the sky into fire. You've been told this is training, but every part of you knows this isn't a drill. Welcome to Deleted Histories. Today we uncover one of the most surreal experiments of the Cold War. Let's begin. It's still dark, the kind of darkness where you can't see your own hand, even if it's trembling in front of your face. You're lying in a shallow trench, sand in your boots, a helmet pressing down on your forehead. The air is cold enough that your breath rises in clouds. Around you, hundreds of men are crouched, silent. Some are whispering last-minute jokes. Others just stare into nothing, pretending they're not thinking about what's about to happen. You've been told this is a training exercise, just another drill. But every nerve in your body says otherwise. A voice crackles over the loudspeaker. 1 minute to detonation. Somewhere ahead of you, a bomb the size of a car is waiting to turn the sky into fire. The wind shifts. You can smell the cold grit of the desert, mixed with something faintly metallic. The kind of smell you can't quite place, but it makes your mouth go dry. The loudspeaker crackles again. 10 seconds. You press your face into the dirt. The soil is cold, damp from the night air. Your heart is pounding so hard you can hear it in your ears. And then, the world becomes light. It's not sunlight, it's white. A light so intense it burns through your closed eyelids. You open your eyes for half a second and instantly regret it. The horizon is a boiling ball of fire. The shockwave hits, the ground beneath you flexes. A wall of wind slams into your trench, flinging dust and grit into your mouth. And then, silence. You lift your head. Rising from the earth is a mushroom cloud so massive, it looks like it's trying to punch a hole through the atmosphere. You've just witnessed an atomic explosion. And in a few minutes, you'll be ordered to march toward it. This was Operation Desert Rock. From 1951 to 1957, the US Army marched tens of thousands of soldiers into the Nevada desert. Not to fight an enemy, but to stand in the shadow of nuclear weapons. The goal? To prove to these men, and to the nation, that a nuclear war could be fought. And won. It was part science, part theatre, and part propaganda. And for many of the men who were there, it was also a slow death sentence. The year is 1945. The United States has just dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world has seen what nuclear fire can do to a city. And yet, just 6 years later, the question inside the Pentagon isn't should we use these weapons again. It's how do we fight a war with them? During World War II, some soldiers fought in trenches, tanks, and open fields. But a nuclear battlefield, that was new territory. Military planners needed to know, how close could soldiers be to a detonation and survive? Could tanks and trucks keep working after the blast? Would troops panic when they saw the mushroom cloud? The only way to find out was to try it. In 1951, just north of Las Vegas, the US established the Nevada test site, a vast expanse of desert where bombs could be detonated without flattening a city. Next to it, they built Camp Desert Rock, a temporary city of tents, mess halls, and parade grounds. From this camp, soldiers would be driven into position for each test. They'd dig foxholes, wait for the countdown, watch the detonation, and then, in many cases, be ordered to get up, march toward ground zero, and walk through the blast site. It was called training. It was also an experiment. At first glance, Camp Desert Rock looked like any other army training site. Rows of khaki tents, the sound of mess kits clanking at breakfast, and sergeants shouting at half-awake recruits. But there was one big difference. Instead of a rifle range or obstacle course, the horizon here held steel towers topped with nuclear bombs. The soldiers stationed here were a mix: infantry, marines, engineers, medics. Some had seen combat in Korea, others were brand new recruits who'd never heard a shot fired in anger. None of them had seen anything like what was coming. For days before a test, troops would practice digging foxholes, setting up sandbag walls, and rehearsing manoeuvres. They'd sit through briefings explaining what to expect. There'd be a bright flash, a loud noise, a wave of hot air. Keep your head down, keep your eyes shut, don't panic. The way the officers talked about it, it almost sounded routine. The first exercises took place in late 1951, under the name Operation Buster Jangle. Around 11,000 soldiers were brought to the desert. 6,500 of them would take part in tactical manoeuvres after the blast. On the morning of the first detonation, troops were placed in trenches about 6 miles from ground zero. That might sound safe, but in nuclear terms, it's barely out of the blast's front yard. They crouched down. The countdown started. When the bomb went off, the flash burned the inside of their eyelids. Some said it was like a camera flash the size of the sun. The heat hit next, followed by the shockwave. A wall of air so strong it made the earth feel like it was breathing. Minutes later, the order came. Advance. They climbed out of the trenches and began walking toward the giant boiling cloud on the horizon. The ground under their boots was still warm. Dust hung in the air, glittering faintly in the light. What they didn't know then was that some of it was radioactive fallout. Military brass weren't just testing equipment, they were testing people. Observers noted how soldiers reacted. Some joked to hide their nerves. Some froze and wouldn't move forward. Others walked straight into the haze as if it were just another drill. The official conclusion: troops could function on a nuclear battlefield. The unofficial truth: many of these men had just been exposed to levels of radiation no one fully understood. By 1952, the tests were becoming bigger and closer. Desert Rock 4 brought in nearly 12,000 troops, with 7,400 taking part in tactical moves. Bombs were detonated in full view of grandstands packed with VIPs, senators, generals, and even foreign military observers. One veteran remembered seeing dignitaries sitting in folding chairs, wearing sunglasses, watching the blast like it was a fireworks show. The mushroom cloud wasn't just a weapon, it was a stage prop in America's performance of nuclear power. And then came 1953, Desert Rock 5. This time, over 20,000 troops participated. The tests were louder, hotter, and more dangerous. Soldiers were now placed as close as 3,500 yards, barely 2 miles, from ground zero. They'd seen the light before, but nothing prepared them for the shockwave at that distance. It's spring, 1953. The Nevada desert is already sweltering before sunrise. More than 20,000 soldiers are on site, waiting for the order to move into position. Some are in trenches barely 2 miles from the blast tower. Others are lined up in convoys of trucks and jeeps, engines idling. The bomb they're about to see isn't just a weapon, it's a statement. America is showing the world, and its own troops, that it can fight under the shadow of nuclear fire. When the flash comes, it's not just light, it's pressure. The air itself seems to shove you backward. Your body knows something unnatural has happened, even if your mind can't quite process it. The shockwave rolls through seconds later, slamming into the trenches like a giant, invisible fist. Soldiers describe feeling it in their teeth, in the pit of their stomachs. Orders come down. Move forward. They climb out, rifles in hand, and begin walking toward the massive mushroom cloud, clawing at the sky. The ground is littered with debris from test structures, houses, vehicles, and mannequins that were placed near the blast to study damage. Some soldiers stop to stare at the scene. Windows have been blown out. Wooden walls are splintered and smoking. A school bus used as a target lies on its side. Up ahead, the cloud is still rising. A boiling tower of fire and dust, silent now, but no less terrifying. For the military's top brass, this is the perfect demonstration. The men have advanced under nuclear conditions. They've stayed in formation. The message is clear. A nuclear war could be fought and won. For the soldiers themselves, the message is different. Many of them will remember that day for the rest of their lives. The light in the heat, the taste of dust in the air, and the strange metallic tang in their mouths that wouldn't go away. By 1955, the tests had become more ambitious. This was Desert Rock 6, part of Operation Teapot. The Marines called it the atomic battlefield. Helicopters thundered overhead, carrying troops into position. Armoured vehicles kicked up clouds of dust as they rolled towards simulated enemy lines. Everything looked like a normal war game, except for the nuclear bomb sitting a few miles away, waiting to be detonated. The Marines moved into their trenches. Officers checked their watches. The countdown began. When the flash came, it didn't just light up the desert, it swallowed it. For a few seconds, the sand, the sky, and the men themselves seemed to be the same colour. White, almost glowing. The mushroom cloud rose faster than the eye could follow, swelling and curling as it climbed into the upper atmosphere. Even from several miles out, the Marines could feel the heat on their faces. Dust whipped into the trenches. Gear rattled from the force of the shockwave. Some soldiers later said they could feel the blast in their bones, like the vibration from a massive bell being struck. Then came the order: move in. They climbed out of their trenches and advanced toward the blast zone, rifles ready. The air was still thick with dust, filtering the sunlight into a strange golden haze. The ground was uneven, cracked. In places, the sand had been fused into a thin, glassy crust by the heat of the explosion. All around them were the test subjects: houses, cars, tanks, and mannequins placed near ground zero to measure the effects. Many were burned black, slumped over in unnatural poses. Some had simply disappeared, leaving only melted scraps behind. The Marines stepped past snapped tree trunks scorched down to stumps. These trees had been planted on purpose, just to see what the blast would do. It turned them into kindling in less than a second. A few miles away, the VIP stands were still full. Generals, senators, foreign observers, sitting in folding chairs, shaded under umbrellas, watching like it was some grand sporting event. For them, this was a demonstration, proof of America's power, proof that the military could fight under nuclear conditions. But for the men on the ground walking through the ghost of an explosion, it was something entirely different. The silence was strange, the kind of silence that comes after an explosion so loud your ears can't process sound for a while. Boots crunched over broken glass and charred debris. No birds, no insects, just a distant hum of helicopters and the wind moving across a dead landscape. Some of the Marines would never forget that smell: scorched metal, burned rubber, and something else they couldn't quite place. A tang in the air that stayed in the back of the throat long after they'd returned to camp. And the taste, that same metallic tang so many had reported. The taste of the desert after it had been set on fire. Now it's 1957, the last and largest of the Desert Rock exercises. This was Desert Rock 7 and 8, part of Operation Plum Bob. More than 14,000 troops took part. Whole Marine brigades, Army units, Air Force observers, and teams of scientists. By now, the military had perfected the choreography. Troops in trenches, helicopters circling overhead, tanks in position, cameras rolling. Every step timed to the second. The bomb they were about to see was nicknamed Hood. It was the largest ever detonated on US soil. As the countdown echoed across the desert, soldiers shifted uneasily in their trenches. Some glanced at the horizon, where the steel tower stood waiting. Others kept their heads down, knuckles white around their rifles. When it went off, the light didn't just hit their eyes, it filled their entire bodies. Men later swore they could see the bones in their hands when they raised them instinctively against the glare. The shockwave came next, slamming into the trenches with enough force to cave some of them in. Men were knocked flat, ears ringing, helmets rattling on the dirt. The air pressure made it feel like their chests were being squeezed from the inside out. Then came the order: advance. Thousands of soldiers climbed out and began moving toward ground zero. The mushroom cloud towered above them, rolling and twisting, casting an enormous shifting shadow across the desert. The sky itself looked wounded. The protective gear they'd been issued was supposed to keep them safe. But the heat was unbearable. The masks fogged up, making it hard to see. Many soldiers simply pulled them off, desperate for air, never realizing they were breathing in radioactive particles that would stay in their bodies forever. The blast zone was like another world. The ground had been scorched bare. Test vehicles lay crumpled and blackened. The frames of houses stood warped and splintered, some tilted at impossible angles. Mannequins dressed like suburban families were scattered across the wreckage. Some slumped in chairs, others sprawled in the dirt. All were charred, frozen mid-moment, like a photograph of a life that never existed. For the high-ranking observers in the viewing stands, this was the perfect ending to 6 years of atomic war games. Troops had performed under nuclear conditions. The manoeuvres had gone exactly as planned. But for the men walking through that silent graveyard of steel and ash, it was impossible not to feel the weight of what they had just done. Some would say later it felt like walking on another planet. Others said it felt like walking through the aftermath of the end of the world. In the official reports, Operation Desert Rock was a success. Troops had proven they could fight on a nuclear battlefield. Equipment had performed as expected. Morale was good. That was the story on paper. The reality took years to surface. The soldiers who had crouched in those trenches, who had marched toward the blast sites began to notice things. Persistent coughs that never seemed to go away, strange rashes, a deep, unshakable fatigue. Some developed cancers in their 30s and 40s. Others had children born with severe birth defects. Doctors didn't connect the dots. Many didn't even know their patients had been part of nuclear exercises. And the soldiers themselves, they'd been told little about the real dangers. Radiation wasn't something you could see or smell. Then there were the civilians, the downwinders, families who lived in small towns and ranches far from the test site, yet still close enough for the fallout to drift down from the sky. They told stories of white dust settling on their roofs, coating their laundry, clinging to their skin. They thought it was harmless at the time. Years later, they began seeing the same pattern. Illnesses, cancers, and early deaths that tore through entire communities. For decades, the government denied there was a connection. Many records were classified, others were destroyed, and those who had been there were often told to keep quiet. By the 1970s and 80s, veterans began speaking out. They formed advocacy groups. They demanded answers. Some remembered the metallic taste in their mouths after the blasts, the way their Geiger counters clicked wildly as they stood in the open desert. The burns on their skin, they had been told, were just sunburn. Eventually, Congress passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. It offered payments to some veterans, test site workers, and downwinders. But the process was slow. The burden of proof was heavy. Many claims were denied. For those who did receive compensation, the money could never undo the damage. It could never restore the health that had been lost. One veteran summed it up in a single sentence. "We weren't fighting an enemy," he said. "We were the experiment." Today, the Nevada desert is quiet. The towers are gone. The mushroom clouds are a memory. But the scars are still there. Some can be measured. In the bodies of the men who trained here. In the graves of the downwind towns. In the court cases that dragged on for decades. Others are harder to see. In the trust that was broken. And in the questions that still don't have answers. Operation Desert Rock was meant to prove that a nuclear war could be fought. That American soldiers could survive and even advance under the shadow of the atom. It was part science, part theatre, and part propaganda. And for thousands of men, it was also the moment their lives began to change, in ways they couldn't yet imagine. It's easy to look back now and ask how they could have agreed to it. But in the 1950s, the bomb was power. The bomb was pride. And when you're a young soldier in a trench, you trust the people giving the orders. The truth is, most of them didn't know the danger. Not really, and those who did, didn't say much. Decades later, veterans still gather. They share the stories they couldn't tell then, about the light that seared their eyes, the shockwave that shook their bones, the dust that never left their lungs. Some laugh darkly, some go quiet. The story of Operation Desert Rock is a reminder that history's biggest experiments aren't always done in labs. Sometimes they happen in the open desert, under the blazing sun, with the whole world watching, and it leaves us with a question that should make us uneasy. When the next weapon arrives, the one we can't yet imagine, will we send people into the fire again? And will we tell them it's safe? This has been Deleted Histories. Subscribe for more chilling, strange, or forgotten history. Until next time.